few days ago, I lost a friend, and the world lost a hero. Captain retired Elgen Long, American aviation legend, pilot and author, passed away. Elgen was a great friend, and he was also the last surviving crew member of the Alaska Airlines Iron Man crew, who brought thousands of Yemenite Jews to Israel during the first days of the newly reborn Jewish state. Elgen was a true gem, a representative of the greatest generation. I had the pleasure and honor to accompany Elgen when he visited the state of Israel in 2018 after many years of having been away. You know, for Elgen, his act of bravery was an act of humanity, and in his words, something that anyone would do under the circumstances, witnessing the plight of these refugees stranded in the desert, condemned to death if it weren't for his and his friends' efforts. When he went to Israel, I asked him, Elgen, what do you want to see when you go to Israel? I'll never forget his answer. I asked, do you want to see the Prime Minister, Jerusalem, the holy sites? And he looked at me, smiled, and said, I want to see them. Who is them? I asked. Them, the people who came with me on those planes to Israel. I want to see what they did with their lives and the opportunity given to them. His request was answered with great enthusiasm. Hundreds and hundreds of them came to see him at two major events that took place in Israel during the visit. They came to admire him, to say thank you, kiss him on the forehead and give him a hug, to express their immense gratitude and appreciation for what he had done, he and his friends, their courage, their humanity, their bravery, and their devotion. When standing together at the president's residence in Jerusalem, the president praised Elgen for what he had done. When Elgen rose to speak, he immediately said, no, sir, it's a great honor to be part of this operation, but it's not for me alone. For with me are my friends who are no longer with us, and all of us together took part in this heroic endeavor. Elgen was truly a humble and modest man, a symbol for all of us, a light that we can all follow to manifest the best of our humanity. I've been in touch with Elgen since he returned from Israel, and many a time he told me that he would like to come back. Elgen, the pilot, the legend, the man, now flies with the angels above, and we all here at JBS, the Jewish community in Israel, cherish his memory now and forever. May he rest in peace, and may his soul be bound in the bond of life. Today, I would like to share with you a conversation I had with Elgen on JBS in 2017 to share his story of rescuing thousands of Yemenite Jews and bringing them to the newly reborn state of Israel. May his inspiration and light live with us all forever. Elgen Long was born on August 12, 1927 in McMinnville, Oregon. He received an AA degree in aeronautics from the College of San Mateo, California, and studied aircraft accident investigation at the University of Southern California and the Norton AFB Crash Laboratory. Between 1942 and 1946, he flew over 100 U.S. Navy combat missions in seaplanes during World War II as radioman and navigator, including Howland Island patrols where Amelia Earhart disappeared. In 1970, Elgen and his wife Marie began an over 40-year investigation of Earhart's disappearance at Howland Island. Elgen has a 60-year flying career that totaled nearly 45,000 hours without accident or violation. He is a winner of the FAI Gold Air Medal, Outstanding Sports Pilot in the World, the Institute of Navigation Superior Achievement Award as Practicing Navigator, Airline Pilots Association Award for Outstanding Airmanship, Franklin Harris Trophy for first solo flight around the world over both poles,
the NAA 2004 Crystal Eagle Award for Lifetime Achievement in Aviation, a holder of 15 aviation world records and firsts, 2009 FAA, the Wright Brother Master Pilot Award for 50 years of dedicated service in the aviation safety industry. In 2012, Elgen was inducted, and rightly so, by the Oregon State Board of Aviation into the Oregon Aviation Hall of Honor. Elgen played a significant role in the early stages of operation on Eagle's Wings, and he is today the last surviving member of Alaska Airlines crews who brought the ancient Yemenite Jewish community back home on Eagle's Wings in 1949. And I am so proud he is our guest here at JBS Eye on Israel today. Thank you very much, Elgen, for being here.
Thank you very much, Shahar.
This is quite outstanding. You've had an incredible career, an unbelievable background, and we can dedicate our program today to a variety of issues. But allow me to start by asking you the simple question. What is your personal background as it relates to the Yemenite Jewish airlift? What's your family? Have you ever had connections with Israel, the Jewish people?
No, I had no connections, and I was raised on the Oregon coast in a small town of 300 population where everybody knew everybody. And we had no Jewish connections at all. My mother was a Christian Scientist, and I was raised, we didn't have two churches in town. We only had one. It was Methodist, so I went to Sunday school in the Methodist church. And I really had no connections with the Jewish people in my early life. But I did have a very, very interesting and very, very wonderful life as a child on the Oregon coast, being raised there.
But no synagogues, no Jewish community centers, no rabbis you encountered
whatsoever.
as a child. So let me ask you this.
Yes,
in your very, very impressive and inspirational bio, it's mentioned that you joined the Navy. How old were you when you joined the Navy?
Well, I was 15 years old, and in January of 1946, I was discharged honorably from the Navy after 3.5 years of service during World War II.
And continued to do what?
I continued my education and under the GI Bill, and was able to actually catch up as if I never lost those 3.5
Straight
years.
from the war. And at what point did you join Alaska Airlines?
I joined Alaska Airlines in the first part of 1948. And we were flying the North Atlantic out of Westover Air Force Base in Massachusetts, supporting our strategic atomic bombing airplanes, B-45s, were stationed in Lakenheath, England, flying back and forth between Westover and England. I was a navigator for Alaska Airlines, but in January.
And how old were you when you at that point?
At that point, I was only 20 years old.
20 years old. And can I ask you, an all-American boy who's got nothing to do with the Jewish people in the state of Israel, who works for Alaska Airlines, ends up rescuing the ancient Yemenite Jewish community and bringing them home to Israel after thousands of years of exile. And I have to say, my family as well, who came on Eagle's Wings on those planes. How did that come about?
Happenstance. I have no idea the circumstances. It just happened. At the end of 1948, I was transferred to Everett, Washington for Alaska Airlines to fly as navigator across the Pacific. They had a new contract flying between Tokyo and the United States. And so I was transferred there, and I made a trip in January of 1948 to Tokyo and back, and then I made a second trip to Tokyo, and while we were there, they said, when the airplane comes, don't bring it back to the United States. Instead, take the airplane and fly it to Hong Kong. The cablegram came to our captain, Captain Larry Curry, and of course we followed orders and did what the company told us to do. When the airplane came in, we flew it to Hong Kong, and we landed at Kai Tak and checked in the hotel and waited for further orders.
And what were these orders?
The orders were to leave Hong Kong, fly up to Shanghai, and pick up a load of passengers and fly them to Israel.
Load of passengers from Shanghai to Israel, and who were they?
They were white Russians, Jewish people who had been in the Shanghai ghetto, and they were still in Shanghai, and they wanted to make the trip and join the Israeli forces now that there was an Israel. Israel was only months old at that time. And
So at the age of 20, you are already part of this incredible geopolitical earthquake in the world when the state of Israel is reestablished and reappears, and as you call it in your book, On Eagle's Wings, the ingathering of the exiles. You bring them not only from Yemen, but also from Shanghai.
well, I was 21 at the time, and Captain Curry and I and the rest of our crew were honored to do it. And we were going to fly to places we had heard of in history books and whatnot, but never had been to. And so it was exciting for us too. And we actually joined in the excitement with our passengers of going to Israel, the new country.
What do you remember of the Jewish refugees who came on the plane in Shanghai?
We had a bit of a problem. They had arrived in China, some of them many years before, but they were not Chinese citizens because they came as stateless people, and China did not give them citizenship. So almost all of them were stateless. They had no passports. They had no country to protect them or anything. They were just an individual person. And we were advised that Israel was at war with the Muslim Arab countries, and that we must not fly over any Muslim country and land there, because if we had an emergency, it would put the passengers at great risk.
Sure.
And we figured out also, they said, though, that we could land at a British Royal Air Force station, and they would service us and allow us to pass on through without question.
Right.
So we found that Bangkok was suitable for us to land at, but we had trouble flying from Shanghai to Bangkok without stopping. We couldn't carry all the passengers and carry enough gas to reach there.
Because of the weight of the freight.
Well, it was because we had to fly at night over Cambodia and the Vietnam, and that was not allowed. Only daylight flights were allowed. But by the time we left Shanghai, it would be dark by the time we got to Vietnam and Cambodia. In the nighttime, you had to fly around them, and it was 30% shorter if you went direct, and we didn't have enough fuel to go around. So I added 30% with the captain's permission to our ground speed, and we reported as if we were going around while we were really going straight across, but it all worked out like we arrived at the right time at the right place, and we arrived at Bangkok without any difficulty.
Right. And how did you manage the weight? Did you encounter anything interesting about the Jews who came on the plane in Shanghai when it comes to...
Well, it really wasn't funny but it was humorous at the time. When they came from the terminal building out to the airplane, they were only allowed one bag, 44 pounds maximum weight, because we had 48 passengers plus some young children, and we were at maximum gross takeoff weight for the airplane. So it was natural. It wasn't cold, but they had on a shirt, and they had on a sweater, and they had on an undercoat, and they had on an overcoat, and they'd have 3 or 4 hats on top of their head. They were obviously wanting to carry as many things with them on the airplane as they could. And that was completely understandable.
Of course. And at what point does the Yemenite airlift start? When do you first arrive in Aden, the port of Aden?
Well, the first time we arrived with that first load was actually the war was still on at that time.
Right.
And the airport was under a security expecting an attack of some sort.
Ben Gurion.
So they turned off all the lights, wouldn't answer the radios, and they were under military control at that time. We arrived, and There was no lights. The tower wouldn't answer us, no contact. But we knew we were near the airport. So Captain Curry kept flying around trying to find a runway. And he did find a runway and was able to make a good landing on it. Actually, it was
Without communicating.
Without communications, no lights, no runway lights, pitch black, no moon. He did an excellent job. And we came to a stop on the runway, but we'd never been there. We didn't know what to do. And then we noticed there was lights coming, and it was probably, we hoped, to follow me that would guide us to where to go and park the airplane. Well, when it came up by the captain's side of the airplane and stopped, and instead of people getting out with a ladder or anything, it was people getting out with guns. It was an armored car. It wasn't to follow me, and they didn't know who we were. Captain Curry opened his side window in the airplane, and they yelled up, "Hey, who are you?" And he told them that we were from Shanghai, China, with Israeli Jewish refugees.
Right.
And they got a ladder and put it up the airplane, and one of the officers, probably the senior officer, came up into the airplane, the cockpit, and to question Captain Curry and make sure what we said was true. And it was. And I remember when he finally decided that we were legitimate and that these people, we had brought them all the way from Shanghai on their aliyah to Israel. I remember, I can hear him saying it right now, "It is a good thing you have done." And he turned left, and then they guided us to a parking place, and we offloaded the airplane.
And his words remain with you to this very day.
To this very day, I can close my eyes and hear him saying it.
And we can hear it with you.
Because we just were doing a job, and that was the first time that anybody ever suggested that we had done something really unusual.
Right. And then you're headed back.
I'm back to Shanghai and made another load.
And when did Aden start, the Yemenite airlift?
We arrived in Tel Aviv, and we arrived just at the end of the ceasefire. There was not a peace agreement yet, but there was a ceasefire. Nobody was supposed to shoot at anybody anymore, so they said. And we arrived and we offloaded, and we had cablegram from the company, Alaska Airlines in New York, that said, "Stay in Tel Aviv for further orders." And we were in Tel Aviv for 2 or 3 days, and Captain Curry finally received a cablegram that told us to leave our 2 flight attendants, we called them stewardesses in those days, leave our 2 stewardesses in Tel Aviv, and just the male crew members fly to Cormaxer Royal Air Force Station in Aden, go back to there, and wait for further orders from there. We didn't know why. We didn't ask any questions, but we did leave our stewardesses and flew to Cormaxer.
And you get to Aden, and you find out that you're bringing more Jews to Israel.
Well, yes, it was a surprise to us when we landed and climbed down of our ladder out of our airplane. The commanding officer, Mr. Captain Keynes, was there on the tarmac to greet us, or there on the ramp to greet us, and that was unusual. Usually the commander of the base didn't meet every airplane that came in. And he started talking to Captain Curry and started asking questions, and finally told us why we were there. He said, "You're going to receive orders from your company to help us here. We have a problem. And the problem is we have about 2,000 Yemenite Jewish people who are refugees and have arrived here illegally, and we can't take care of them. Some of them sick. We don't have a hospital to take care of.
And these are people who marched through the desert in Yemen all the way to the Aden Protectorate to seek refuge from the Arabs who were attacking them as a result of Israel's reestablishment."
We found out later, yes, all those things. But they were in great danger to be where they was. There had already been over 80 of them had been killed, and others had died. Some of them were very ill, and they had contacted the Israeli government, said, "You have to help these people get out of here. It's a matter of life and death.
And you're a man on a mission. So at this point, the plane only has 58 seats.
It was 48.
48.
Yes.
And you want to make sure that as many as possible are able to come on board to take them to Israel. What did you do?
Well, we couldn't exceed our weight of the airplane. It would be dangerous. So we had to find a way. We found out that they were really, some of them, they were in small stature. Most of them didn't even have shoes, let alone full clothing in the Western sense. It was a warm desert territory down there. And they hadn't eaten, many of them in a week, and some of them sick and hadn't eaten longer even. We asked him, how much do you think the average one weighed? And he said, well, a lot of them are children, and some of them are babies, and probably maybe 80 pounds apiece. And so we multiplied 80 times their weight and how much weight we could have. We with the fuel we needed and with the oil and our crew, we figured we could carry 150 of them. But there was only 48 seats, and of course the ones under 2 could sit in their parents' lap, but that was only the babies and the young ones.
So you got rid of the seats?
Well, it was suggested by one of the crew members they take the seats out, and then we could get more people in.
And these people were seeing an airplane for the first time.
They'd never seen an airplane.
Yeah.
They had no idea what it did.
What did you see when they were coming? Did they come easily on board, or?
Well, we had another problem. With 150 people in the airplane, they weighed 12,000 pounds, which was fine. We could carry that. But if it were a freight, we could tie it down. But without seats, we couldn't tie them down. And we had the problem, we could not allow them to go towards the rear of the airplane, or we would lose control of the airplane. The weight would overcome our ability to control it. And one of the gentlemen one of the crew came up with the idea, well, I can put a cargo net right at the entrance to the rear of the entrance door, and would tie it all up real good and have their rabbi tell them they cannot touch that cargo net and under no circumstances go behind it.
So you're saying the rabbi, in the sense you sensed their spirituality? Did you see how connected they were to Judaism at the time when you met them?
At that point, because they really didn't want to get on the airplane. They didn't know what it was, and they were afraid of it, and that's understandable. So the rabbi finally reminded them of their biblical prophecy that they will return to Israel in their aliyah on the wings of an eagle.
They bore you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself.
And that's the first we'd heard of this, but they understood that, and that was part of their teachings and part of they'd been waiting thousands of years to return to Israel.
And you are part of that redemption, Elgen.
Well, we didn't know it at the time. We were just doing a job, and it was a matter of saving their lives.
You keep on saying you were doing a job, but the truth is you weren't a soldier at the time. You were a member of Alaska Airlines crew. And you were talking about the cablegrams and the orders, but you did it. You didn't complain. You flew for very long hours. You slept very little. You got the job done. What made you do it?
Well, it was the right thing to do. These people were going to die if we didn't get them out of there. And if we only carried 75, we'd be leaving 75 behind that were in danger. And so we knew we had to, just human being, that we couldn't leave them there to die. So as much as we thought was reasonably still safe, we allowed them to come in as long as it kept the airplane within the limits of its capabilities and our capabilities.
When you think about your history, when you think about the role you played in the ingathering of the exiles back to Israel, the Jews from all over, how does that make you feel?
Well, we felt good, but we were just doing what anyone would do under the circumstances.
And yet, from the 50,000 Yemenite Jews who came during the operation, you had spawned over hundreds of thousands of people, families all over the world, owing their lives to you. Because if it hadn't been for your courage, bravery, and playing around with the rules to make it happen, they would have ceased to exist with the local hostility. You have created a monumental change in history, Elgen.
Well, we really didn't realize that at the time. We were saving individual lives as our focus was. We didn't have the knowledge to focus on the future that far ahead.
But maybe today I'll ask you.
All right, sir.
So many young people are watching us. They're listening to your outstanding story. They're going to be getting your book on Eagle's Wings. What do you want to tell them? What's your message?
Well, the message really is what everybody really knows is within them, they have to have respect for other people and their humanity. And if it comes to a matter of life or death, you must help them, or to help them in any way that you can. And I think most people do. I mean, that's just part of being a good human being.
Captain Long, you're an inspiration to all of us. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be in your company. And today was not only a taste of what was, but really listening to Captain Long, we understand what we need to do. The realization that we can believe in ourselves and our ability as individuals and a society to do the right thing towards one another. And if we only believe in our power to make a difference, to change reality, we will be able to. When you speak, Captain Long, we all sense that the wings of history are upon us, and the realization that whatever it is that we feel that needs to be done, we can get it done. Not because it's such a huge thing to do, but because it's the right thing to do. And I want to thank you on behalf of JBS and on behalf of the State of Israel and the Jewish people for the role you played in resurrecting our nation, and for the fact that so many out there today owe you their lives, for their kids and grandchildren, and the goodness that you have bestowed upon us with your courage and bravery, you and your teammates. Thank you, and thank you on behalf of my grandparents, who were fortunate enough to come back to Israel because of the risks that you took upon yourself to make sure they get there. Thank you for your humanity, Elgen.
Thank you very much.
And thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.